in the excitement of the moment, I forgot to invite Nick Smith to refer his bill to Select Committee. Oh. So to correct my error, I seek the leave of the House for the Christian Churches New Zealand Property Trust Board empowering bill be referred to the Government Administration Committee. There being no objection to that, we've handled that one. Next question. The speakers have had some inquiries as to whether the vote on this bill will be a conscience issue determined by a personal vote. Normally, the sale of alcohol is treated as a conscience issue by parties, and that fact is known generally well in advance of the first reading of a bill. In the case of this bill, which was introduced by leave today, there has not been the opportunity to gauge whether, in fact, parties have positions on it. Therefore, people in the chair will determine during the course of debate whether parties have positions on the bill or whether they are treating it as a conscience issue. And the obvious things will flow from that.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to take a call in support of the first reading of Mr Seymour's sale and supply of alcohol extended licensing hours during the Rugby World Cup bill. And Mr Speaker, just noting your ruling, can I begin by indicating that the National Party will be supporting the bill at first reading. That's a decision of our caucus, and I'm very pleased to be able to indicate that support to Mr Seymour. Mr Speaker, there is no doubt, I think, within this House that we have a very unique situation here that deserves a unique response. We have a tournament being played on the other side of the world, representing not only the third largest sporting event in the world, but more importantly for most New Zealanders, the game that New Zealand really, I think, considers its national game, and featuring our own very much beloved All Blacks. And so not everyone in this country is sports mad, but a vast majority of us are absolute die-hard All Blacks fans, and the sensible ones also Crusaders fans, but that's another debate which we won't get into. Why? Yeah, I know. But sir, watching the All Blacks is something that I think New Zealanders really do regard as a critical part of being a New Zealander. And certainly, sir, the Rugby World Cup comes around once every 4 years, and there can be no doubt that it has a special place in New Zealand, from the attention it gets to our focus on it, to the very mood on the street you can feel as you walk around New Zealand, depending on whether the All Blacks have played well, or on the very rare occasion where that hasn't happened, you can certainly pick that up in the air. And so in this particular case, as I mentioned, the tournament is being played on the other side of the world, and uniquely the way the scheduling has worked has meant that almost every single game is played in the few hours that the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act deem as prohibited hours for trading for licensed premises. And so while the Act certainly provides a framework for special licences to be granted, and so that system works very well in the vast majority of cases, in a situation like this, where you will be having a huge number of licensed premises from Cape Reinga to Bluff, wanting to be able to offer an alternative to their communities to get along, watch the game live in a group situation where you can feel the excitement of the crowd, and you can feel it's not quite being there, but it's pretty good. It's good as it gets from this side of the world, and so that is not something that we would want to see affected by a process of unnecessary levels of bureaucracy. And I think the intent of this bill is a good one, which is to ensure that that isn't unreasonably disrupted. But to be fair, and Mr Seymour and I have had this discussion, it's the National Party's view that there are matters within the bill that we think we would want to look at more closely. In particular, we have a view, sir, that the games that should be covered by this blanket granting of a special licence for every facility in New Zealand, that's a very, very high threshold and a very unique set of circumstances that justifies it. And our initial view, certainly going into this process, is that that sort of blanket grant of a special licence to licensed premises around New Zealand is certainly warranted for the All Blacks games and is warranted for the playoff matches, but it's hard to make the same level of argument for some of the other teams who have been playing. Not to say that there won't be interest in them for some New Zealanders, but not to the level that would warrant an automatic blanket special licence to every game, to every bar in New Zealand. So that's certainly something we'll be wanting to discuss. In addition, it's important, I think, and I'm sure many members of this House will agree, that the bill fulfils its purpose of removing unnecessary hurdles and compliance so that New Zealanders can watch the game, but not in a way that takes away from core host responsibility provisions that we would expect our licensed premises to comply with. And I think that there are some very simple, practical changes that could be made to the bill just to ensure that we get that right balance between facilitating New Zealanders' enjoyment of the bill without seriously degrading any of those host responsibility and actually neighbourhood responsibilities that these licensed premises need to be mindful of. So the other issue that is worth picking up is really just one of the workability and the application of the bill. I certainly have an interest as the minister responsible for the underlying legislation that any amendment act that is passed to this act is workable, is clearly understood, and will be easily applied, and if reference needs to be sought to it for enforcement purposes, then that can be done without any debate over what Parliament meant. Now, I absolutely appreciate that the circumstances in which this matter arose and the reasonably fast-moving playing field, to take a reasonably unfortunate sort of pun, has shifted quite a lot in the last few days, and Mr Seymour has worked very hard to try and navigate his way through that. But the speed of drafting and the limited resources available to a member to put up a member's bill means that process is a challenging one, and I think there are certainly some drafting opportunities in the bill that we can work together on to improve the bill and get it into as good a shape as possible. Mr Speaker, the last point I did just want to make is simply to say that actually the underlying framework of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act works very well. I'm very comfortable that the framework is right. This is not some sort of signal that there is an issue. This is a signal of one thing and one thing only, which is that this is a unique set of circumstances that holds a particular place of importance to New Zealanders all around the country, and it deserves a response of this House. Sir, in the vast majority of cases where events occur in odd hours around the world and with different sporting codes and different events, the special licensing provisions, I think, work incredibly well. But, sir, we do, and the National Party, recognise the uniqueness of this situation, the uniqueness of rugby and the All Blacks to New Zealand, and we commend this bill at first reading.